Hi, I'm Murthy from the Catholic Archdiocese of Perth, reporting for Shalom World. Today, we are joined by Perth Archbishop Timothy Costelloe, who has the responsibility and honor of hosting the Australian Catholic Youth Festival right here in Perth.
That's right, Amanda, I do, yes.
Welcome, Archbishop
Thank
Costelloe.
you, thank you.
Thank you for being with us here today.
My pleasure.
Let's talk about what's been happening so far. Being the host, as I mentioned, what have you been doing around at the festival?
I've been pretty busy, Amanda, to tell you the truth. The festival, as you know, officially started on Sunday morning, yes. But we had a special Mass in the Cathedral on Saturday night because most of the pilgrims are coming from interstate or from a long way away in Western Australia. So they all had to travel on Saturday so that they could be here to start on Sunday morning. So it was actually a lovely beginning because we had a Mass in the Cathedral with a number of the bishops and their pilgrims, yeah, who joined all of our regular people at Mass on Saturday night. But bishops from Australia were spread all across the diocese, celebrating Mass in local parishes, and then the parishes were offering them hospitality afterwards. And at the Cathedral, I think we probably had about 300 young people whom we, yes, provided a lovely meal for afterwards. So it was a great start.
Yes,
a busy start.
We were there.
It was good, wasn't it?
It was amazing.
Yes, yes. And then, of course, it kicked off on Sunday morning, and it's been non-stop ever since.
Yes, and there's so much energy, especially during the plenary sessions when, yes, everyone's together.
Yes.
What are some of your thoughts on the enthusiasm of the young people here so far?
The enthusiasm, you can't miss it, can you? Someone said to me this morning, when you walk in the door of the convention centre, you can already feel the buzz of excitement. So, yeah, the energy levels are pretty high, in a very positive sense. You know, there's a great deal of enthusiasm amongst our young people. I think a real openness to what the Youth Festival has to offer them. Maybe a bit of surprise on the part of some who thought it might be just all serious talks and long prayers and those sorts of things. And there are some serious talks, and there are some beautiful times of prayer. But there's also a lot of fun and a lot of music and a lot of movement and lots of different activities. So I think it's been a bit of an eye-opener for many of our young people.
Yes, and there's been so many surprises as well. And exciting things like Archbishop Costelloe coming in on a scooter.
Indeed.
That have definitely pumped up the crowd in
Absolutely.
In that term. What are your top 3 highlights of the festival so far?
Look, the plenary this morning I thought was very beautiful. There was a very special moment when James, who is organising those big plenary sessions, first of all, you'll remember he invited all of the leaders to stand up. All the young people stayed sitting and got the leaders to stand up and the teachers to hold their hands out over the young people and pray for them, yeah, which was very beautiful. And then they sat down and all the young people stood up and held their hands out and prayed over their leaders. And it was a very moving moment, and the cameras were sort of roving around, and I could see even a lot of the leaders and the teachers, tears running down their face as the young people were praying over them. So that was a very beautiful moment, yeah, I thought. Last night we had the plenary, and we had, after a lot of energy in the music and all of that, we moved into some Taizé prayer, which again was a very beautiful movement. Yes. And from a very selfish point of view, I was impressed that I was able to manage to handball the football, yes, into the crowd and not mess it up. So that was a highlight for me as well.
Great job. And you're also the president of the Plenary Council.
I am, yes.
And the theme of the Plenary Council has been somewhat adapted into this festival. In your thoughts, how important is the voice of the youth through this process of the Plenary Council?
It's absolutely vital, the voice of young people. And one of the reasons why, when I was approached about the possibility of holding the Youth Festival here in Perth, I had my hesitations at the start. It's such a big thing, and we're not an enormous archdiocese, but one of the reasons I decided to say yes was because it did provide us with a way of giving young people a real voice in the plenary council. Like everyone else in the church, they've been invited to contribute to all of the different consultation processes, but to have nearly 6,000 people here together and to have lots of opportunities for them to share what's deepest in their hearts about the church as they try to listen to what God's asking of us. I thought it was a really special moment for us. So, the plenary council is already underway in a sense. The first formal sitting is in October next year. But the voice of young people that we've heard, in all sorts of different ways over the last couple of days, it will now be a very significant voice when we all gather together.
Yes, and part of discerning is, I guess, a lot of young people who are here today, who even I've engaged with, talk about their vocation.
Yes.
Is there any advice you can give them for the young people who are searching for what their next step is,
Yes.
whether it be in their careers or
Yes.
religious life or marriage
Yes.
or anything
Yes.
like that?
It's a great question and a really important topic. Part of the theme of the council of the youth festival, of course, is exactly the theme of the plenary council. Listen to what the Spirit is saying. And so for young people, that's a really important thing, because our young people, many of them, are right at that moment where they have to make some big decisions or feel that they're being called to make some big decisions. And to make those decisions in the context of an awareness of God's presence in your life, an awareness of the importance of the church in your life, I think that's really important. So yes, vocation is a big issue. And in the past, I think we made the mistake of thinking that the only true vocations were if you became a priest or a brother or a nun.
Yeah.
They're still true and very beautiful vocations. But everyone who's baptised has a vocation and a pathway in life. And I think if I wanted to give anyone advice, I'd say to them, try to listen carefully to your heart. Read what's going on in your heart. Because I think it's not just young people, it's all of us these days. We often live on the surface of our lives. We're so busy, so caught up with everything. But God speaks in the depths. And so to find times, and we talked about it at the plenary session this morning, to find times of quiet, not easy in a busy world, to listen to what God is perhaps calling you to, what moves you, what sort of stirs your heart. Those are the sorts of things that I think can help us read God's will for us.
Yes, thank you. That was great.
Yeah.
And also this ACYF is a great way to celebrate the life of the church here in Australia. A lot of young people struggle with their faith journey. I recall even in my youth struggling with my faith at some point, but always knowing that God is there. What would you say, why should we as Catholics be proud and celebrate our faith? What would you say to young people?
It's a really good question, and I think, as I said in my opening talk on Sunday morning, many people think, and they're not completely wrong, that the church is in a bit of trouble, or at least that the church is going through one of the most difficult periods in its history, for all sorts of reasons. So some people can easily get discouraged, some people can feel that the church has lost its way, or that they can't find their place in the church anymore. I think the most important thing, and this is really important to me, is to remember what the church is or who the church is. We often talk about our church, and we'd like our church to do this, or I want my church to do that, and that's fair enough. It gives you a sense of ownership of the church. But in the end, it's not our church, it's God's church. Yeah. And I think to rejoice in the fact that for some wonderful but strange reason, as God has called us into his church and given us all the beauty and all of the challenge and all of the richness of the church to enable us to live our lives to the full. So my advice is to remember that the church is at the same time a very human institution with all the faults and failings of a human institution, but also a divine institution founded by God, given to us through Christ, empowered by the Holy Spirit. So we don't need to be afraid, we don't need to despair, we don't need to lose hope. The church is in God's hands, and it couldn't be in a safer place.
Yeah, beautifully said. And as a leader in this community here in Perth, the priests and the religious are somewhat teachers to us,
yes,
lay people. However, is there anything that you have learned from the Perth community that have maybe helped you in your leadership or rather ministry?
That's a challenging question. The answer is clearly yes. But you've perhaps reminded me, Amanda, I don't reflect on that enough myself. I did say in my opening address to the plenary session on Sunday morning that the church, and of course when we say the church, we don't mean just the bishops or just the Pope or just the clergy, but the church as a whole community, we both need to be teachers and learners. All of us in the church need to be teachers and learners. And that's why I said to the young people on Sunday morning, you know, you're very welcome at the Youth Festival with your questions and with your yearnings and with your hopes and with your challenges and with your questions. We want to be here, we, the leaders in the church, want to be here to teach you and learn from you, to lead you and be led by you. This is what Pope Francis is on about when he talks about a synodal church, a church where everybody's ready to listen to each other, learn from each other, and I think then journey forward together. Not seeing the divisions but trying to create the unity. The church is all about being the people of God who are together trying to walk in the footsteps of the Good Shepherd. So that's what I would say. And I'm learning, and I see it at the Youth Festival, how many young people, I've just been up in the chapel, it's full of people kneeling there in adoration of the Lord in the Blessed Sacrament. You know, we can learn a great deal from each other about what is at the heart of the church. And of course, what is at the heart of the church isn't a what at all, it's a who, and it's Jesus.
Yes. And if you had a dream, I'm sure you have many dreams for the church.
Yes.
The Catholic Church in Australia. What would you like to see in the next 10 years?
It's the perfect question for a local church, the church in Australia, which is engaging in the process of a plenary council. So if I can sort of rephrase the question a little bit, people often ask me, Archbishop, how will you know if the plenary council has been a success? And the answer that I usually give is something like this. There may be big decisions, there may not be big decisions, there may be some changes, there may not be major changes. That will unfold as we go along. But if after the plenary council finally finishes in June of 2021 and we begin to implement the council, if we can honestly look at the church in Australia and say the church is now a more faithful church, faithful to what the Lord wants for his church, then the plenary council will have been a success. Not going to be easy to work out exactly how we measure that fidelity, but in the end, that's everything. The church has got no point in existing unless it's faithful to what the Lord created it to be. So that would be my answer. It's perhaps a bit airy-fairy, but that's what I'm looking for, what I'm hoping for. A church which is just deeply, deeply faithful to the Lord, to what he wants for his church, to be that living sign in the world that Jesus is still with us and present to us. So that's my dream and my hope. So.
Yes, and our final question, Your Grace, if we could conclude this interview.
Sure.
Firstly, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
And all the great work that you do. But if we could conclude this with sort of a complete the sentence.
Okay, I'll try.
And the statement is, Jesus wants the youth of today to know this.
To notice or to know this?
To know this.
That he loves them, that he's with them, that he walks with them as a good shepherd always walks with his flock, that sometimes he's in front calling us forward, that sometimes he's behind us pushing us onwards, sometimes he's beside us accompanying us, but he's always with us and he never leaves us. And as Pope Francis said in his letter to young people, that Jesus is alive. Christus vivit, Christ is alive.
Thank you so much, Archbishop.
Thanks, Amanda, very much.